Hashem, the Torah portion today, Parashas Vayishlach. There's so much to talk about here. But what I wanted to especially focus on is just the scene where Yaakov is by himself and then he wrestles with an angel. And I want to read these psukim, and then after we read these verses, I want to look at what the Talmud says about it. The Talmud and Chulin has an extended discussion of it. And after we look at the Talmud, I want to look at the commentary of Nachmanides, gives a powerful explanation, and Seforno. And then after we look at Nachmanides and Seforno, maybe look at the Lubavitcher Rebbe and some Hasidic explanations. So first, let's read these verses together. I'll make Rabbi Yosef the co-host. So anytime he's here, he's able to share. Okay, so what we're
What? Yeah, I'm going to get it in a minute.
What we're talking about here is chapter 32, verse 24. It says that Jacob takes his family, Vayikachem, he took his family, Vayavirem et hanachal, he brought them across the stream, Vayaver et asherlo, and he brought that which was his with him. And then, verse 25, Vayivaser Yaakov levado, Jacob remained by himself. Very powerful, emotional words. So it said, Vayivaser Yaakov levado. Yaakov remained by himself, which is incredibly powerful and poignant. And at the end of the day, he had this big family, he had this empire that he built, he had this just tremendous relationship with so many people, but he's all by himself. At the end of the day, when we come before God, it's just going to be us by ourselves. We can't have any of our props to protect us. And Vayavek Ishimo, and the man was struggling with him. Who is this man who's struggling with him? Adalos HaShachar. He struggled with this man until dawn. We'll see what Rashi says, and we'll look at the Talmud. But Jacob is by himself, then how is there a man there? It seems completely contradictory. If he's by himself, there's no other man with him, unless we would say that the most logical explanation for this really is that the man maybe is Jacob himself. Jacob is the man who he's struggling with. Who knows? And that's not the way Rashi takes it. And the man struggled with him until the dawn. Also, such a beautiful verse. He struggled with the man. He struggled until there was a dawn. Till the dawn came and a new light arose. Vayar ki lo yacholo, and he saw he couldn't best him. This strange man. Who's this man? He couldn't defeat him. Vayiga b'kaf yirecho, and he struck the ball of his thigh. Vatoko kaf yerach Yaakov behavko imo, and the ball of Jacob's thigh bone became dislocated as he wrestled with him. Vayomer, and he said, Shalcheni ki ala shachar. He said, send me away, because the dawn has risen. Vayomer lo ashalechacha, I will not send you away, kim beirachtani, unless you bless me. Vayomer 11, he said to him, Ma shemecha, what's your name? And he says, Jacob. Okay, and then he says, your name will no longer be Jacob, it'll be Israel. But these verses are so moving emotionally. And in the end of the verses, Jacob says to him, these are very well-known verses, so I'm sure you're familiar with them. Jacob says, what is your name? And he says, why are you asking my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, because he said, I saw God face to face, and he saved my soul. So these verses just cry out for interpretation. They cry out to be understood on a deep level. Rashi, with most of the classical commentaries, adopts the approach of the Talmud. So I'm going to get to that in a moment, but I want to point out that why was he by himself? Rashi says what the text of the Talmud in Chulin 91a states. So let's start by reading that together. Says, and we're not even going to be focusing on the deep implications of the idea of what's called the Gid Anasha, that Jews don't eat the sciatic nerve. Of all the things to not eat, why is that something? Why is that? Is that how we remember this encounter, by not eating something? Usually, we remember something by eating something. We eat matzah. We eat in a sukkah. Here, we're remembering it by not eating something. That doesn't really necessarily work. But let's see what the Talmud says. Vayivasar Yaakov Avadu. Jacob remained alone. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Says Rabbi Elazar. First of all, the Talmud wants to know, why is Jacob alone? Why is Jacob alone? Says Rabbi Elazar, Nishtaya al Pachim Ketanim. He remained back for small apach. What's a pach? Anybody know what a pach is? So, in the holiday of Hanukkah, which is coming up in less than 2 weeks, they said then the Hasidic commentaries connect this. They said they found one pach of oil, one cruse of oil, and some say that this was the same pach that Jacob went back for. That's the one they found. A pach is like a kitchen utensil or like a knickknack. He went back for that. Mikan tzadikim. From here we see that for the righteous, their money is more precious than their body. Meaning to say, he risked his life for it. Because it's dangerous to be by yourself, as we see from the continuation of the story. So, why did he go back? Why was he so careful about a little kitchen knickknack? Because the righteous are very careful not to steal. But there's a question, right? What's the significance? Why does the tzaddikim care so much about their money more than their body? So the Chasam Sofer gives an explanation. I'll share with it, and then I'll explain what I think it means. The Chasam Sofer it says in the Talmud, whoever benefits, this is in Brachos 35b, whoever benefits from this world without a blessing, it's like you're stealing from God. But the righteous, all their ways are with Yosher. Everything they do is upright. So none of their possessions are considered theft. Everything is b'kedusha and tahara, with holiness. And so therefore they love their money more than their body. That's what the Chasam Sofer says. What I think this means is that tzaddikim, every resource they have is used for Hashem. Every single resource, no matter how small it is, it's all used for God. Every single thing. And so therefore, he didn't see, a kitchen knickknack. He saw something, like we said at the beginning of this statement. He saw the future cruise of oil that the Chashmonaim would find. Every single thing is part of the holistic system of God. And so that's the idea of the tzaddikim. They don't see it as just like one man's trash. They saw it as the treasure of God to be used for the resources of Hashem. And that's why he went back for it. So that's the concept, that Jacob went back even for this small little object, because for him, that small object was part of the service of Hashem. Then the Talmud continues, Vayayavek Ishimo, and the man struggled with him ad alosa shachar, until the dawn. Says the Talmud, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Mikan Talmud Chacham shelo yetzi yachidi b'layla. From here we see that a Torah scholar should never be by himself at night because it's dangerous, because the people want to attack him. So then there's a whole question, well, then why was Jacob by himself? Okay, we'll leave that aside for another time. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana said, no, me'acha. That's a different source for the idea that you're not allowed to be by yourself at night. That was from the book of Ruth, because Boaz was in the granary at night, and behold, Ruth came upon him. Anyway, so he says, the Talmud continues. It says, Jacob says to the man he was wrestling with, he said, the man says, send me away because the dawn has risen. So Jacob said to the angel, or we call him an angel, but the text doesn't identify him as an angel, it just says he's a man. Jacob says to him, Ganavata ukubiyustusata, are you a robber or a kidnapper? Shemis yaremin ashachar, that you're afraid of the dawn? Amarlo malachani. He says, I am an angel. He's an angel. Umiyom b'shein nevresi, lo higiyaz mani lomar shira arachshav. From the day I was created, I never was picked to be the one to sing the songs of praise to God until now. This is my moment, says the angel. This is my moment to sing the song before God. That itself causes us to stop. What does that even mean? What does that mean? So the Brisa, the source, interrupts it and says the following. This was a support for Rav Hanano in the name of Rav, who said there were three groups of angels that say songs of praise every day. One says Kadosh, the other one says Kadosh, and the third one says Kadosh Hashem Tzivakot. I want to pause for a second and said, how come took so long for Jacob to realize he was an angel? Because he appeared to him as an idolater. That's what. Because it says, the angel said, send me away, because the dawn has risen. So that's why Jacob didn't realize that he was an angel. The commentaries also ask the question, why is this the day where this angel had to say the songs before God? Because it's brought down in a sefer called Avodas Yisrael in the name of one scholar, they don't say his name, that every angel would sing the praises of God when he did the will of God. And this angel, it said on Amud Aleph that he was the Saro Shel Esav, that he was the angel of God. Hold on one second. We'll go back to, we skipped that part, we'll go back to it. This angel was the Saro Shel Esav, who was the minister of God. What's another name for that? That's called the evil inclination. And his job was to convince people to not do the proper will. But the true will of the Yetzer Hara is that a person will not listen to him, but that'll conquer him. And that's the reason why he was created. And Jacob was the first person to conquer the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, that was the time that he came to say the Shira at this moment. Okay, let me just pause for a second and think Bruce or April have a question. And so to address Bruce's question, there's a dispute in the Talmud how he appeared. So let me read the full dispute. I didn't say it properly. So Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said, that the angel of God, that this man who he was wrestling appeared to him like an angel. Like it states, Yisrael shenitpalo ovikam b'derech tofo yamino. That's why the Talmud has a discussion which which tendon is prohibited, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the Torah only prohibits the gid nasha of the right thigh, the sciatic nerve on the right thigh, and it's because that if you're walking with an idolater, the idolater should be on the right of the Jew, meaning to say that the Jew should walk to the left of the idolater, so that if the idolater will rise up to kill him, his right hand will be right next to him to do battle. So that's why he wrestled with him on the right side, because that's where they were next to each other. So that's proof that he was an idolater. But to go to Bruce's point, then he should have realized, why did he want his blessing? So Rav Shmuel Bar Achai says in the name of Rav Papa, the name of Rabbi Bar Ula, no, he didn't appear to him like an idolater, but he appeared to him like a Torah scholar. He said, that somebody who walks on the right of his master, Harei is an idiot, because he's not honoring him. And so therefore, Jacob gave him honor, and he walked on his left side, because he thought he was a Torah scholar. So what are the rabbis who say don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda? How do they understand it? What do they say it means he struggled with him? He says that it means, what does the word heyavko imo mean? It means that they kicked up the dust of their feet up until the kisei hakavod. When they were struggling together, the dust of their feet went all the way up to the throne of God. As it states here, Be'avko imo, and it states there, Anan avak raglav, a verse from Nahum. Okay. So, anyway, this is some of the Talmudic explanations of this passage. But the fundamental idea is, who is this man that the rabbi said that who is this man? That this is Saro Shel Esav. He was the angel of Esav. What does that mean? That each nation is assigned an angel in heaven whose job it is to watch over for them. And this was the man who was wrestling with Jacob. So before we go on, I want to see, does anybody want to explain who they think, what the significance of this man is? Anybody have if there was ever a passage in the Bible that cries out for symbolism, I think it's this passage more than any other passage. But if nobody has a shot at it, I'll read what the classical commentaries say.
So I was just
yes, yes. Hold on 1 second. So many classical commentaries view this as maybe symbolism or maybe even a dream. And Ramban, Nachmanides, also goes down that path. He says, so Ramban says as follows, that it says in the Bereshit Rabbah that when he struck him, when this angel struck him, Naga b'koat tzadikim shatidin liyom mimenu. He didn't just strike Jacob. He struck every single tzaddik that was going to come out from him. This is the words of Ramban. Ramban faced a lot of persecution. The Doro Shel Shmad. This refers to the generation of persecution. This angel that was wrestling with Jacob was not just wrestling with Jacob, he's wrestling with me and with you and with every generation of Jews where we were attacked by the forces of Esav, the forces representing Esav. V'anyan, and he says, Ki ha'me'ura kulo, this whole incident, Ramez L'Dorotav, is a hint for his generation. She'ador Bizarro Shel Yaakov Yitgaber Esav Aleim, Ad sheyeh karov u'ke'aka veitzatan. That the generation of Esav, that there will be a generation in the seed of Jacob where Esav will get so strong until he's almost crushed them completely. That this is what Ramban writes in the 13th century, that there'll be a generation, and the generation of there'll be a generation, there will come a time where Esav's forces will almost completely crush Jacob, almost crushing them to the ground. And Ramban writes, and in fact, this was another generation in the time of the Mishnah, like Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava and his friends who were persecuted, the time of the 10 martyrs. And like it states, said Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Ramban quotes, if a man will say to me, give your life for the sake of God's name, I would say, I will give it as long as he takes my life immediately. I can't deal with this persecution. But the generation of persecution I can't bear. And what were they doing? They were bringing hot balls of iron and putting them into the fire, and they would put it under their body parts, and they would immediately die. And then Ramban writes, and there are other generations where they did with us like this and worse than this. And says Ramban, V'akol savalnu ve'avar aleinu. And we took it all and we defeated it. As it states at the end of the verse, Vayavo Yaakov shalem. Jacob came home in peace, complete, whole. So Ramban reads this verse as symbolizing Esav's eternal struggle against Jacob, that Esav will be upon us, knocking us, punching us, kicking us, wounding us. But ultimately the dawn will rise and Jacob will come out complete and whole, and he will surpass it. And that is how Ramban reads this verse, that it's a reference to the fact that Jacob will survive the attacks of Esav. So that's the symbolism that Ramban sees here. I want to look for a moment and share with you. I saw also a beautiful explanation in the Sephorno. Now, Ramban also, I want to point out to you, Ramban is writing this in the 13th century in Spain, where the Jews were facing tremendous persecution. Ramban had to flee for his own life. He had to flee for his own life because of persecution. And there's no doubt that this had an impact upon him. There's no doubt, I think, in reading this explanation, that this had an impact upon him. But similar comment was made by Sephorno. So Sephorno, okay, let's just get the exact date. Sephorno, hold on one second, was born in 1470 or 1475 in Italy. And so he also takes a similar explanation. He says, Vayavek Ishimo, and a man wrestled with him. Writes Sephorno, this was the work of an angel sent by God, as we find Yerei Vayaor. Shoot, and he shot. It was to demonstrate the purpose of this encounter, as Jacob is coming back to his homeland, was to demonstrate that God will save Jacob and his children in all their confrontations with Esav, even though there will be material loss at times. Ultimately, there will be salvation and blessing with mastery both in heaven above and here on earth. So, as they say, Pake Sephorno, Pake Ramban, Sephorno views this as ultimately symbolic of our struggle, but the promise that we will be complete. Elaine, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, well, after you...
The Lubavitcher Rebbe writes to answer Elaine's question about what's the difference between the angels at the beginning of his life at the beginning of his departure, and the angels now, the Rebbe writes, quoting actually Mor Nevuchim, which you can have all of Saul's lectures online on our YouTube channel. The Rebbe writes that more broadly, angels can refer to other non-corporal phenomena. Angels can mean phenomena that's not physical, such as human intelligence and emotion. This is Lubavitcher Rebbe in his Likutei Sichos, saying angels can mean he's wrestling with his own emotion, like Jeff was pointing out before, that he could be wrestling with himself, and he wounded himself. So basically, I mean, and there are others who read this whole passage as but a dream, but also that's the same idea that this is Jacob wrestling to identify who is the enemy. And maybe, everything was clear when he was running away. But now that he's coming back, I mean, Elaine, you're the psychologist, that maybe now as he's coming back, he's wrestling with how should he interact with his brother. It's much more, hate is a much easier emotion, much clearer than love and reconciliation. So when he was running away, it was very clear. There were some angels who went up and some angels who went down, and he was on the way out. But now he's coming back. And he doesn't know who his brother is. His brother for him. We still don't know to this day. What did Esav have in mind? Was Esav for him or against him? We still have very strong opinions about that. At that moment, it wasn't clear either. Jacob was wrestling, and he was wounded until the dawn. So I think that's, if we take the Rebbe's approach, that it's emotion, I think it becomes a little bit clearer. Are you trying to say something, Elaine? You're adding?
Yeah, that's
So now we did some of the classic explanations. The Rebbe's, the Rebbe's also get into this, and they view this as like an existential crisis. Jacob being by himself. At the end of the day, it's just a relationship between him and God. So one approach is, at first, and here's the connection of the two parts of the tractated Fulin. Why did Jacob go back for the small pachim, the small containers? So, I mean, Jacob needs to go back for the small containers? Seems like this holy man was going back for the small containers. So at first, that's exactly the point. Because at first, the Yetzer, how does the Yetzer Hara, how does the evil inclination defeat us? It's always over the little things. The Yetzer Hara gets a person, and the Yetzer doesn't wake up one day and tell us to do a major sin. Nobody's going to do that. We start by feeling bad about ourselves, by doing small sins, minor sins. And then we move from the small sins to the major sins. But the trap is in by the small sins. Because if we let down our defenses about the small sins, then the Mela, everything else will eventually fall. And says the Gemara in Shabbos along these lines that this is the way of the Yetzer Hara. Today he says do this, tomorrow he says do this, until eventually he says go worship idolatry, and you run and go ahead and do it. Okay, so that's one idea there. Now, this is from the chief rabbi of Israel, talking about struggles. But this was the old chief rabbi, back when I had a tremendous respect for the office. This is Rabbi Herzog. And I saw, by the way, in Ireland, they're trying to rename the park of the chief rabbi's son, who was the president of Israel. Anyway, Vayavek ish imo. So he says, when we have this struggle, our enemies use two methods to attack us, and it's really one main approach. The main approach is one struggle is the power of anger, meaning to say, it says in the Talmud, like the enemy. He appears to us like our enemy. Like it says in the Talmud, as Bruce pointed out, it says he appeared to him like an akum, like an idolater. Whereas the other approach is the spiritual threat, meaning to say the spiritual threat against us. He gets us into arguments and disputes because he wants to prove to us from the Torah that his ways are correct. And that's why Rav Herzog says there are two ways that the enemy can appear. This angel appeared. The Talmud says one approach is like an idolater, and the other approach is like a Torah scholar, meaning to say that he could be appearing to us like a Torah scholar. He makes believe he knows the Torah, but in the end he's trying to dispute us. So there's two ways we have to be on guard, both for the threat of the enemy and also for the threat of the enemy who claims that he's not our enemy, but he's really indeed trying to convince us to abandon our faith. This was a big threat for the Jewish people throughout our history because proselytism was a big deal. Nowadays, you don't really see it as much overtly, but that was always a struggle. Okay. Anyway, let's just do one more. So this is from Rav Yitzchak Nissenbaum. He says as follows: that the Talmud says one approach is to appear like an idolater, the other approach is to appear like a Torah scholar. When Jacob was standing on the border of Israel and he wanted to return to his birthplace, the angel or his own inclination was struggling with him and trying to stop him. Meaning to say, sometimes it appears to him like an idolater. Sometimes the nations around us try to say that this is not your land, and they're against us, and sometimes they try to bring us proofs from the Torah that we're not allowed to go up to the land of Israel. They try to tell us not. Jacob, according to this approach, the Zionistic approach, he was standing on the border, about to go into the land of Israel, and he's being told from the Torah, don't go in. I had this encounter, actually, I went to the Rimnitzer's kever, and there was a guy there who was just yelling at me about how bad Israel was. This is a religious Jew telling me that Israel was the worst. And that's this approach that Rabbi Nissenbaum is saying, that sometimes the Torah scholars themselves are the ones who are misguided. Sometimes even the Torah scholars are misguided. Unfortunately, we know that that's the case. And on that happy note, we'll stop here, but it's such a beautiful passage. We need more and more of it to study. We'll stop here.